Let's have a look at the three strikes law, shall we? Because that's something that actually became law today. Revived three strikes sentencing law takes effect. I am disheartened how little the mainstream media did on this tonight, especially. I didn't watch 3 News, but I've had a look for their highlights. Couldn't see anything. 1 News had nothing, but they did cover it at 6:01 a.m. this morning. Way brilliant. The revived three strikes law has come into force, targeting repeat offenders of serious, violent, and sexual crimes with progressively harsher penalties. This is something very, very, very important to remember, because I will show you some examples shortly of what happens as people who are not serious, violent, or sexual criminals get caught up in this. It's one of the biggest issues with the three strikes law. I've got some examples from a Stuff article, which I'll show you in a sec. Associate Justice Minister Nicole McKee said those who committed serious, violent, or sexual offences should expect to face increasingly severe consequences. The Sentencing Reinstating Three Strikes Amendment Act 2024 reinstated the regime repealed by the Labor government with changes to make the legislation more workable. McKee described it as a centre pillar in the coalition government's law and order program. New Zealanders have had enough. They want safer streets, safer homes, and a justice system that puts victims first. The law's restoration was detailed in the National Act Coalition Agreement. I want to just divert for a second here, Chewie, and tell a story. Now, I'll tell this story, and I'll be very clear that I'm not giving anyone any advice to do this. When I used to work late night talkback radio, you get a lot of old people phoning up, and because apparently they don't sleep well. And I can remember something had happened to me that day, and I lived in West Auckland, and I'd gone out to go into the shops or something, and I was out for an hour, and I came back, and the door was wide open. The front door was wide open. And I thought, and it's really simple. I would have pulled it behind me. It didn't latch on, it blew open. How was the house? House was fine. Door was open for an hour. Had a lady phone up talking to me about I used to live in a neighborhood where I could sleep with my windows open. And I said to her, what do you think would happen if you slept tonight with your windows open? And she went, nothing. And I went, yeah. Tend to agree. This idea of fear of safer streets, safer homes. I'm not telling people to sleep with their windows open. I'm not telling people to go to shops and leave your doors open, because things do happen. But things happen disproportionately low to how much these kinds of governments want you to think they're happening. If 1,000 houses tonight went to bed with their front door closed but unlocked, I was going to say one will get robbed. Probably none would get robbed, but let's say one would get robbed. Now, when you're the one, we've talked about this before about anecdotal evidence versus data, it's the worst thing in the world, and 100% of that one thing has happened to you, which is why I've said I am not telling someone to sleep with your windows open. But the amount of fear that these kinds of governments put into society that is disproportionate to the reality is a cancer in Western society. New Zealanders have had enough. They want safer streets, safer homes, and a justice system that puts victims first. 99.999 recurring percent of streets and interactions and moments that you're out there are perfectly safe, but they want you to be fearful. I've mentioned this before, that documentary Bowling for Columbine, where they went to South Central Los Angeles where Rodney King was beaten, and it was a lovely leafy street, and they talked about violent crime was trending down, and then there was a professor that Mike, whatever his name was, Michael, what's his name who made that documentary? Big round dude, whatever his name was. Chat will tell me in a sec. Michael Moore said asked them the question, and the professor or the expert said, yeah, but coverage of violent crime has gone up 600%.
Yeah. I was just going to say.
And that's it. That's it. Finish the story.
I think I've talked about this before, the odd little tangent about why crime is trending downwards. Lead and petrol and paint.
Oh yeah, this is a story that's been around, screwing with people's brains.
Yeah.
I've heard that before. I don't know if it's a urban myth or if it's reality. We should look into it. But I have heard that before. There's several negative interactions in society that they wonder if it can be tied back to some of the things that were floating around in the era in our society of the era, and that's one of them. Let's just get to the end of the story, shall we? 42 offences, including murder, attempted murder, manslaughter, sexual violation, abduction, aggravated robbery, and the newly added strangulation and suffocation offences, qualify for strike. But just remember this, whānau, and I'm not saying this to minimise any of those very serious crimes. The government has taken away the ability for judges, they've either taken it away or they're planning to have nuance, which means what will happen at some stage is something will technically be something, but it will be on the much more minor offence of it. And I'm not downplaying the serious nature to victims, but you then say to someone, does this offence really deserve 20 years in prison? And the answer from 99% of people would be no. If a person convicted of one of these offences for the first time, they receive an official strike warning in their sentence. If they were convicted of a second qualifying offence, they were given a second and final warning and would be sentenced without the chance of parole. If the person is then committed with a third qualifying offence, they would be automatically receive the maximum prison sentence without a parole. McKee said ACT provided for some judicial discretion to prevent. Well, I don't know if that's true. We should look at that because they wanted to take discretion away from the courts. It was one of the cornerstone things they were talking about. To prevent manifestly unjust outcomes, principles and guidelines to aid the court in applying the law were included, as well as limiting benefit for the guilty pleas to spare further trauma to victims and court delays. That sounds slightly like not removing a little bit of due process to me, but we'll get some more details about that. Importantly, previous strike warnings still count if they met the new sentencing threshold, ensuring serious repeat offenders can't escape accountability. The Ministry of Justice has published guidance to help affected individuals and their lawyers check for active strikes. Now, actually, Chewie, why don't you have a crack at that first of all? Then I'm going to go to the spin-off article it might be from 2018, but it gives some examples of what exactly these strikes have been in the past.
One thing I want to bring up is everywhere that has implemented a 3 strikes regime, and like all good crime and punishment policies, this was birthed in the US. Everywhere that it's been tried, including here, last time we did it, it exploded the prison population.
Well, but they want that. This government wants that. They want it to be up by several hundred. That's what their target is.
Absolutely exploded it. Didn't really have much of an effect on the crime rate, because going to prison, yeah, sure, it might be a little bit of a consequence, but the people that are doing these things don't tend to think about consequences that much. They're not sometimes like normal people, or they're not in normal situations where you pro and con something before you do it. So it doesn't really affect crime rates at all. So why are we doing it?
Yeah. But the reason we're doing it, and I think that this goes back to the idea that this government in particular wants bumper stickers and slogans that they know and have researched will work. Tough on crime. That works. Tough on crime. So it's actually, as long as the slogan works, then that's all they need. All this government needs is for the slogan to work, whether the actual legislation works or not. Because if the slogan works, they get re-elected. It's as simple as that. Let's have a look at some more of these examples. Won't go through all of them. So this is a brief history of New Zealand's most absurd 3-strike cases from Spin-Off. The most well-known three strikes case is that of Raven Casey Campbell. The first person to be sentenced for a third strike in New Zealand, Campbell, who earned his first two strikes by committing robbery, both aggravated and not, got his third when he groped a female prison guard while serving his second sentence, an offence that constitutes indecent assault. No, I agree, that's not smart. And like, what a prick. Absolutely. But did that therefore require to a further than 7 years for what he did? Because that's what he got. The 3 strikes in the max, they would call it. A couple of other ones. Take the case of Matthew Barnes, decided just 3 months ago in the Court of Appeal. Last year, then 22-year-old Barnes was convicted along with 3 others of aggravated robbery after they robbed a security guard and punched and kicked him as he lay on the ground. There's the thing as well, though. These aren't necessarily nice people. We're not actually standing up for them. What I'd like to stand up for is the rule of law and to make sensible legislation that helps society rather than harms it. And I suspect this will end up harming society, like it seems to have done in every other situation any kind of 3 strikes law has been brought in. While 2 of his accomplices would be eligible for parole after less than a year, Barnes was made to serve out 2 years and 6 months without parole. Why? Because it was his second strike, which, as the original judge put it, will send you and the others a really additional and harsh message about what these strikes are all about and the real consequences that they can have. Barnes' first strike followed a sexual relationship he had with a then 18, had with a 14-year-old girlfriend. For reasons that are still not clear to me, the judge in that case said the matter came to the attention of police and you were questioned by the police. Barnes was ultimately convicted of sexual connection with a young person aged between 12 and 16. Deciding that jail wasn't appropriate, the judge instead stuck him in home detention for 5 months and slapped on 200 hours worth of community work. Barnes still ended up with his first strike for, quote, serious violent offending. More. I won't do that one, it's too long. Oh, but look at this headline. If you're engaged in another aggravated robbery, whether it's a minor aggravated robbery for $5 or it's a major bank robbery, you must be sentenced to the maximum term of imprisonment unless it would be manifestly unjust. 14 years imprisonment without parole. I know, look, we know what the counter argument is going to be. Well, don't commit the crime. You know, but sometimes crimes have more to do with, or less to do with willpower, yes or no, more to do with other things, addiction, mental health issues, you know, abuse issues. It's not, we don't live in a world that's black and white. We live in a nuanced world. So having outcomes or legislations that are black and white eventually can lead to a detrimental outcome for society. One of the earliest 3-strike cases that caused outrage was that of a 69-year-old man suffering from Parkinson's and dementia who groped a fellow patient at his home for the disabled in 2010. The man's lawyer argued that the behaviour was a side effect of both his condition and the medication he was taking, something that isn't unheard of. Regardless, the man whose condition was so bad he needed help dressing, bathing and getting out of bed and had to be helped into court by 2 officers, was charged with 2 counts of indecent assault, facing a possible first strike.
Well, I don't know about you, but I feel safer already knowing that he is off the streets.
Well, we're going to play a clip with David Seymour, and one of the questions that Ryan Bridges asks him is, how much safer is this going to make us? It's very intangible. Sorry, what you're going to say?
Anything that removes the ability for a judge to judge should instantly be thrown away. What's the point of having a judge in that case? Shall we just have if this then this way of sentencing someone?
A vending machine. Just pull that lever and that lever and then take out the...
Just a fucking flow chart straight to the gallows. It's...
And also, listen, this government has said it's not doing cultural reports, right? But they're saying we want to take discretion away from judges. But in this instance, they're saying, well, we want to give discretion to the judges. The story is not lining up, right? And when the story doesn't line up, I get filled with dread. And I'm not filled with dread for me. I'm filled with dread for the vulnerable in society. I'm filled with dread for people who are going through things that could be a contributing factor towards bad decisions they're making. We don't live in a black and white world. We live in a world of greys and nuance. Therefore, a black and white outcome when it comes to crime is never going to be the best outcome, in my opinion. How about this one? In another case, an 18-year-old boy got a first strike for assault after he accidentally injured a shopkeeper while trying to nick a couple of bottles from a liquor store. There was also the case of a 21-year-old who racked up 2 strikes after stealing $68, various items of clothing, a lighter and a cell phone from victims he kicked and punched. The judge warned him that when you next steal a hat or a cell phone or a jacket or a skateboard, you will be sentenced to 14 years imprisonment without parole. Now, again, I know what some people are going to say. They're going to go, don't steal then. This is not the world we live in. That's like telling the alcoholic, don't drink then. Just stop. Just stop drinking. We don't live in a world of black and white. Black and white outcomes, especially when it comes to things like imprisonment, I think my honest held belief is we'll end up harming society more than it will help. Chewie.
Yeah, harming and costing. You know, we've spoken before about how long it costs per year to keep someone in prison locked up. Like, it flies in the face of, and I'm banging a dead horse here, it flies in the face of all research and evidence. This is not a policy that is going to reduce crime. It is a policy that is going to blow out our prison numbers. It is a policy that is going to cost the New Zealand taxpayer far more than any other option. The problem that the government is trying to solve is not crime. The problem that the government is trying to solve is we want to be the government. We don't want to be opposition. And this seems to fucking work.
Getting re-elected.
So we are going to ignore everything. Like, people have a hard-on for crime and punishment.
Yeah.
Like, if it was on the ballot to have the death penalty, they'd fucking go that far as well. People want to see bad people punished, whether it works or not.
Well, I mean, like, the thing that we just said, though, as well, bad people. I mean, people who have come to the end of their rope and have no other choices. I mean, you can use the silly example about when you think about, you know, the 1800s, stealing a loaf of bread to feed your family. What's the equivalent of that today? I don't know. Bad people? Maybe. Maybe not. Sick people? Maybe. Maybe not. We don't live in a black and white world. So therefore we can't have a black and white justice system.
We don't want cultural reports because the word cultural is scary for some people, but we don't want to have anything that engenders any sort of sympathy for somebody's situation. We don't want that as a factor. And I get that there are a lot of people that'll write letters to the fucking Herald or their local newspaper about how judges have got it wrong because they don't think someone's childhood has any bearing on how they turn out as an adult. You know, you look at some of those cultural reports that came out, people with some of the most horrific childhoods, the people that they should have been able to trust the most, did the most damage. They never got the setup that any functioning human got to be a productive, stable member of society, and then they come crashing into the crime and punishment. You know, maybe they got no help from the state, maybe they got the wrong help from the state, maybe they were hurt by the state. And yet when people look at, like, I'm the same as any other normal person. I read the court news, and maybe there's an interesting story in here, and you see these horrible things. You know, if it bleeds, it leads. It gets people's attention, and they read the horrible thing that the person has done, and they make a judgment on that person that they have never met based on what's printed in the paper. And there used to be the cultural report. There might be a mention of that they had they bounced from foster homes, they were sexually assaulted, they were drinking and smoking weed at the age of 9, you know, out of school, all of these things that kind of paint the picture of why this person did this horrible thing. And then the judge is gone, and I think this is the mistake, right? The judge makes his judgment, 14 years in jail. But I'm going to give you a discount because of your cultural report. And I've always believed that the use of that language, a discount, really, really skewed how people received that information.
Yeah. Look, all of that, and then put on top of it how the justice system already treats Māori in a very different way from everybody else. Like, and,
Yep.
and the very easy statistics that anyone can look up, and if there's any crunchies out there, you can do the work yourself rather than asking me to provide you the evidence, that more Europeans smoke cannabis, more Māori get arrested for smoking cannabis. Europeans get sentenced at half the rate that Māori do when committing the same crime with the same background. Like, it's unquestionable. Then bring 3 strikes into it. It's like, okay, so if there's something tipping on the edge of a strike or not, if they're Māori, oh, definitely strike. If they're non-Māori, yeah, probably doesn't quite reach the threshold. We already live in that system, and that's something to always think about.